My dad used to say, "Education costs you no matter where you get it." I bet I heard him say that 1,000 times, and each time I heard it, I was at a different place on my own journey. I have been paying for my education my whole life, in doctoral programs, in 26 years of clinical practice and internships, in raising children, in living with family addiction, in repeating the same mistake over and over, genuinely expecting a different result, until I finally learned that was a form of insanity I did not want to continue. In order to change, I had to do more than want it to change. I had to make a commitment to opening up and being teachable so that I would be interested in looking at what was happening and what it was trying to teach me, because before that, I used it as an excuse to blame others, to feel like a victim, to pray that my knight in shining armor would come in and rescue me, until I realized I was going to have to become that knight in shining armor and rescue myself. So, if it is okay with you, I would like to share with you some of what I have learned on my life's journey. In 2016, I completed a doctoral dissertation at Capella University. My research asked a question that had lived in me for most of my adult life. What is the lived experience of becoming self-forgiving? That question did not come from a textbook. It came from my own journey. I had learned to be self-forgiving through the education of my life, through clinical practice, through years of teaching and learning. And then life sent me back into the old training, back into survival. And I lost the ability to be flexible and to heal and to let go, the very things that had gotten me through before. When I finally found my way back, I wanted to understand what had happened. What was the process I went through? How did I get here? And as I started looking, I found that there was not a lot of research on that question. We are taught how to forgive others, but there is very little that maps the internal process of forgiving ourselves. That question lived in me, and I honored it, and I decided to answer it for myself. I chose a methodology called heuristic inquiry. What that means in plain language is this: the researcher is not standing outside the study observing other people. The researcher is a full participant. My own experience was not a bias to be set aside. It was data. I was not studying self-forgiveness from a distance. I was studying it from the inside because I had lived it, and I wanted to know if what I had learned through my own journey was bigger than me. So I interviewed 8 other people, 9 of us all together, from different generations, different cultures and religious backgrounds, different life circumstances, with an open mind, really looking for an understanding of the process. And what we found together was a map. 6 themes emerged from the data. Theme 1, the dark night of the soul. Theme 2, the social echo of shame and reconnection. Theme 3, profound self-transformation. Theme 4, self-forgiveness as a moral necessity rather than a moral judgment. Theme 5, the ability to receive love. And Theme 6, continued growth. 9 completely different stories, and the same 6 landmarks appeared in everyone. That is why you can trust this map. It was not built from one person's experience. It was found in 9 and confirmed by 26 years of clinical practice. Those themes are the research foundation that everything in this book is built on, and they will be explored in depth in part 1. This book is intended to engage the reader no matter where they are in life's journey. It is part of a teaching system that includes music, meditation, the written word, and video, not as extras, as access points. When someone is carrying an active wound, the walls are up for a reason. Those walls are doing their job, protecting someone who needs protection. This teaching system does not ask you to take down a single brick. Music can reach through the wall. A story can reach through the wall. An image or a video can reach through it. Not because they are sneaking past your defenses, because they offer something safe enough to receive while the wall is still doing its work. You get to stay behind the wall until you no longer need it. And while you are there, you get to observe. By observing, you get to learn what is being taught. to decide if it is something you want to engage and learn more about. There is an old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I want this book available so that when the student is ready, they know where to find the map. That is the teaching method, not just in this introduction, but throughout the book, the courses, the music, and everything the Self-Forgiveness Institute offers. We need safety before we are willing to trust anyone with our wounds, including ourselves. And so, the words in this book are chosen with that in mind. Words have power. We want to make sure we are using words that offer respect and patience, that provide the experience of safety while you are considering your own journey, looking at the map to see if it is something you can trust. One way I would like to share what I have learned is through a story. I have a personal relationship with the Wizard of Oz. Over the years, in my clinical practice, I have looked at that movie and tried to understand it. But the reason I kept coming back to it is because of how it affected me as a child. The first time I saw The Wizard of Oz, I was in 3rd grade, and it terrified me. When I saw the witches and the flying monkeys, it was not an entertaining story to me. It was threatening. It was scary. I had a very raw reaction of terror because I used to dream about a witch coming to take me away. At that time, we did not have the ability to stop and pause a movie. We had 11 kids sitting around a little TV, all listening intently, and my dad and stepmom trying to hear the movie. And I was the child screaming at the top of my lungs. They decided the best way to deal with that situation was to lock me in the stairway that goes upstairs to the dark bedrooms instead of trying to comfort me. That was further traumatization. I kept seeing the witches and the monkeys coming after me, and I was locked in the darkness alone. Nobody was there to explain to me that I was going to be okay, that it was not real, that comfort was not there. And so that fear stuck with me at a visceral level for decades. Then, as an adult, after I had gone to school and had a better understanding of how the mind works when you are in 3rd grade versus how it works when you are an adult, the difference between concrete thinking and abstract thinking, I watched it again. And it is amazing how that same movie, the exact same movie, created an understanding of myself and the misunderstanding of myself. I found compassion, I found empathy. Where there had been terror, there was now a map. The difference, as I came to understand it, is between experiencing something from the mind of a child who has only concrete thinking capability and experiencing it from the mind of an adult who can think abstractly, beyond right and wrong, good and bad. A child relies on the adults in their world to help them interpret what they are experiencing. And the first time I watched that movie, nobody was there to help me understand that I was okay, that I was safe, to comfort me. But nature has a very unique way of offering what you need until you finally find a way to receive it. I was resistant to what the world was offering me as I evolved, because I hung on to the idea that I wanted it from my parents, from the people that I loved. I wanted them to be the ones to teach me, to parent me, to give me what I needed. And it took many years to understand that they did the best they could. They did not have what I needed. They could only give me what they had. And when I stopped judging and resisting and started receiving what I needed from those who did have it, I was open to learning things I could not have learned any other way. Rescuing myself meant I would have to find the areas where my development got interrupted. I could see as an adult what my children needed, and that helped me see what I also needed, and that I could not do for them consistently what they needed me to do when I got triggered and sent back into the old warrior pose of defense. In order to do for them, I first had to do for me. The reparenting, the understanding. I could not give any more than what I had been given, any more than my parents could give me, any more than they had been given. So I knew that if I wanted to repair it, I would have to go find teachers who knew how to parent, who knew how to love, who knew how to bridge the gap. I had to lay down the sword of defense and fear and open myself up to being vulnerable, to admitting that I did not have the answer, and that I needed to find the people in the world who had the abilities I was trying to develop. The content did not change. I changed, the safety changed, and that is what this book is offering you, a safe place from which to look at the map. So, let me show you what I see now when I watch that movie. But I want to start at the part that usually gets left out. Before the tornado, there was a girl in Kansas who was already carrying something too heavy for the life she had been given. Her family was busy with the farm, too consumed with survival to hear what she was trying to tell them. A neighbor had arrived at the door with a legal order, official and final, demanding the one thing Dorothy loved most. She was told she had to give up her dog, and so she ran. She packed what she could carry and walked away from home, because staying felt more dangerous than leaving. She did not yet have the map. She had not yet learned that the darkness she was running from was already inside her, not outside in the neighbor's yard. Theme 1. The dark night of the soul does not arrive with a tornado. It builds quietly in the ordinary life that cannot hold us. The community's verdict was already running. She was a problem. She did not belong. She got into trouble. Theme 2. The social echo was not something she would encounter in Oz. She was already living inside it in Kansas. Then the storm came. We tend to think that is where the story begins, but Dorothy was already deep in her journey before the first cloud appeared on the horizon. The tornado did not create her struggle. It gathered it up, lifted it out of the life that could not hold it, and set her down in a world where what she had been carrying could finally become visible. The chrysalis does not begin the darkness. It is what happens when the inner turmoil that has been building can no longer be deferred. If you have been waiting for your own tornado, or if yours has already come and gone and you are still spinning, or if you are somewhere in the middle of a Kansas that is not working and you cannot quite name why, you are in the right place. The journey was already yours before you knew it had begun. A girl from Kansas is swept up by a tornado and dropped into a world she does not recognize. She wants to go home. She feels lost and has no idea where she is or how to get back. So she listens to the directions that come from this new place she has landed in. And in this new place, fire and mercy unite and offer her a path. The only person who might know how to help you get home is the great and wonderful Wizard of Oz. He lives in the Emerald City, and all you have to do is follow the yellow brick road. Dorothy is willing to go on this path because she has been told that the wizard might know, not that he will, that he might. She follows the road on faith, not certainty. On that road she meets 3 companions, a scarecrow who believes he has no brain, a tin man who believes he has no heart, a lion who believes he has no courage. They join her because they are looking for the same thing she is, the answer to what they believe is missing in them. But Dorothy has another companion, one she brought with her from Kansas. Toto is small, vulnerable, innocent, and loving, and Toto is willing to bite when threatened. Toto got in trouble for protecting Dorothy, for biting the neighbor who came to take him away. The innocent part of her was punished for doing what it knew how to do, protect. And when Dorothy felt like she could not get her needs met where she was, when everybody was so busy working, they did not have time for her. She ran. But she did not run alone. She took Toto with her. She took the part of herself that she could see as innocent and worth protecting, even when she could not yet see herself that way. You do not go into the chrysalis alone. You take all of you, the parts that feel like not enough walk beside you on the road, but so do the parts that have protected you, loved you, and comforted you in the times when you felt alone and lost. Dorothy carried both on the whole journey, and at the end, in front of the wizard, it was Toto she moved to protect. That was her threshold. And it was Toto, the small and innocent part that had been with her all along, who pulled back the curtain. Here is what I have come to understand about this story through my clinical work and through my own journey. Those three companions are Dorothy's not enough walking beside her. The scarecrow is the part of her that believes she is not smart enough to solve the problem with the neighbor and her dog. The Tin Man is the part that believes she is not loving enough for everybody to stop and give her the time and help she needs. The Lion is the part that believes she is not brave enough to figure it out on her own. In order for Dorothy to help them, she had to see them as vulnerable. She could see their need clearly in a way she could not yet see her own. She could help them seek answers at the same place she was going to get her own answers. How do I get home? I feel lost. How do I find my way back? The companions are not missing anything, not one thing. The scarecrow is brilliant. The Tin Man feels everything. The Lion has more courage than he will ever know. What they are carrying is not a lack, it is a verdict. Something outside of them, somewhere along the road of their life, delivered a judgment. You are not enough in this way. And without anyone present to offer a different reading, the verdict became identity. It hardened. And they walked around believing it was the truth about who they were. Theme 2, the social echo. That is what I call it in my research. The community's verdict about who you are, delivered before you had any capacity to examine whether it was true. Nobody gave the Lion his courage at the end of the story. Nobody installed a brain in the scarecrow. The wizard could not give them what they already had. What the wizard gave them finally was the honest explanation. I cannot give you what was always inside you, and the journey, the whole long road from Kansas to Oz and back, was what created the conditions for them to discover that for themselves. But Dorothy still had to believe it. She had to click her heels and say it 3 times. There is no place like home. There is no place like home. There is no place like home. That belief is what forged the sword of love. That is what took her home. And when she got there, everything was the same. The farm, the family, the people who had been too busy to hear her. Nothing outside had changed. But Dorothy saw everything completely differently because she had changed. Theme 3, profound self-transformation. The misunderstanding inside her had been corrected, and that correction changed the way she understood the world she had been living in all along. That is what this journey does. When we change the misunderstandings within ourselves, it changes the way we see the environment we are in. This is what the Serenity Prayer teaches. To accept the things we cannot change, the things outside of ourselves, the people and places and environments that are beyond our control, and to change the thing we can, which is our own attitude, our own misunderstanding, and the wisdom to know the difference. That wisdom does not come from being told. It comes from the journey. We put our energy into the road, and the road teaches us to love ourselves. And when we can love ourselves, we can receive love from others. Theme 5, the ability to receive love. And it changes the way we show love, because we are no longer living from misunderstandings. We are teachable. We are observing what is happening around us, learning to discern what we can change and what we cannot. And those experiences create the wisdom that will help us with the next evolution, and then the next. Theme 6, continued growth. We continue to grow. Like everything in nature, if we are not growing, we are dying. And so we learn to tend the environment and create fertile ground to grow from. At the end of the story, the scarecrow asks Glinda, "Why did you not tell her before?" And Glinda says, "She would not have believed me. She had to learn it for herself." That is the whole teaching in one line. Dorothy needed the journey. She needed to walk the road, meet her not enough, protect the innocent part of herself, stand up to the wizard, and discover that what she had been looking for was never outside of her. She needed the evidence. She needed to see for herself that she was smart enough to solve the problems, brave enough to face the wizard, and loving enough to protect what was vulnerable. She did not need anyone to give her those things. She needed the journey to show her they were already hers. Theme 4, self-forgiveness as a moral necessity. Not a luxury, not a reward for getting it right, but the only path home. And then she needed to go home, not to a different place, to the same place, seen with new eyes. The chrysalis is where we go to do that work, where fire and mercy unite to forge the sword of love. And inside the chrysalis, there are ways back home, gentler language when we speak to ourselves, clearer boundaries when love gets heavy, honest presence, staying near instead of running, compassion when we break. Those are not rules, they are practices. And every time life presents us with obstacles, we have to learn to navigate. Those experiences give us wisdom. We just need to create a safe enough place to process what is happening to us so we can gain that wisdom instead of just surviving it. The chrysalis is that safe place. The road back home is always open, and every time we return, we know the way a little better. Here is how Dorothy's journey maps to the journey of self-forgiveness. Dorothy looked for answers where she was and could not find them. She could not get anyone to hear her, and she could not solve the problem on her own. So she ran. She went looking outside of herself for the answers. And then the tornado became her threshold, the thing that turned everything upside down and landed her in a place where she had to face what she was actually running from. What she was running from was herself, her sense of not being enough, not being able to solve her problems, not being able to get others to solve them for her. That is theme 1, the dark night of the soul. And it led her into the chrysalis, which for Dorothy was the tornado itself, where everything she thought she knew got turned upside down. Inside the chrysalis, she kept looking for answers outside of herself. She did everything she was told to do. She followed the road, she listened to the wizard, she faced the tasks he gave her. And by doing all of that, without knowing it, she challenged every belief that had been holding her captive, that she was not smart enough, not loving enough, not brave enough. Theme 3, profound self-transformation. She took her innocence with her on the whole journey, and that innocence is what allowed her to see the truth. The truth set her free, and it helped her find her way back home, not to a different place, but to herself. She could finally receive love because she had learned to give it to herself first. Theme 5, the ability to receive love. That is the map. That is the journey of self-forgiveness. That is not a fairy tale. That is the research. If you have ever walked a road looking for the thing you believed was missing in you, if you have ever waited for someone powerful enough to hand you what you could not find on your own, if you have ever concluded that the reason you are still hurting is that something must be fundamentally wrong with who you are in the right place. This book is for you. I quietly ask myself, almost on a daily basis, what is wrong with me? I am doing everything I know to do, and I still feel so lost and so miserable. I look around, and I am doing the things that I have been told to do, and I am earning the things that I have been told are important, and I do not feel happy. I do not feel joy. What is wrong with me? So I went on every yellow brick road I could find looking for the answer. I had studied forgiveness for years. Through all of my programs, the research was on forgiveness, forgiving others, the neuroscience of shame and repair, the frameworks that explained how people get stuck and how they find their way through. There was very little, if any, research available that talked about self-forgiveness. I did not even think about it as a topic area. Not yet. That would come later, after the road I'm about to describe taught me something I could not have learned any other way. I completed all the coursework for a doctorate in education and moved into the internship and dissertation phase, ready to do research at a state penitentiary. Safety issues at the penitentiary ended that promise. The research I had designed was no longer possible there. So I accepted that and adapted to the change and looked for a new position where I could work and do my research. I moved to Minnesota and took a position as clinical director at a correctional facility for adolescent boys. I was assured I could do my research there. A year in, the parent company had legal issues at a facility in Pennsylvania, and as a result, they closed the door on the promise to do my research at their facility. For legal reasons, that had nothing to do with me. Once again, I was looking for answers on how to move forward. I called the chair of my department to discuss the situation with my dissertation, and he informed me there had been a change. The accredited program I had completed and was in the process of writing my dissertation for an ED, a Doctor of Education, had shifted. My professor offered a path, one more year of coursework to convert from the doctorate in education to a doctorate in psychology. I moved back to South Dakota and took him up on the opportunity to graduate with a PhD. I completed all of the coursework, and once again, I was designing my third research proposal. Then my family's addiction became unmanageable again. This time, I realized I could not finish my dream of getting a PhD in counseling psychology. That sense of 3 times "you are out" was the realization I had been circling. I knew there was no question that we had done everything as a family that we knew to do to help my family get the help that they needed. And the decision of the mother, knowing in my gut that it was hopeless, still having to do it because the weight was so overwhelming that I could not stay and do what I was doing anymore. The trauma you live with when your children are struggling with addiction, with legal issues related to those addictions, with loss of custody due to those conditions, that underlying trauma had risen to a higher level, and I was not able to process the new information. I was not able to plan the dissertation. I was not able to study for the comprehensive exam, in part because my ex-husband's girlfriend's son, who my kids referred to as their stepbrother, was killed in an accident, and the grief hit the whole family so hard that none of us were able to move on with life as usual. We all needed a clean start. We needed to find a way to process the loss because it ran deep throughout the whole family. And the one coping mechanism that had been challenged by them just getting out of treatment, one of them still in treatment when the news came, I could understand that at a deep level because the news confused me. When they told me, I thought they said that my son was there and he was not doing well. And my brain heard that to mean he was in the accident and he was not going to make it. The day I got the news, I was in a session with a client, and when they told me on the phone that my son was at the accident site and that he was not doing real well and that his stepbrother did not make it, my brain was not able to process the information the way it normally would. What they were telling me was not something that my mind could understand or accept or integrate, so I went into shock. That is something that happens without your permission. I just found myself in a state of shock, doing my very best to clear up the misunderstanding. When I got to the ambulance, my son was inside sobbing. The officers informed me that he was one of the first people at the accident, but that he was not in the car. What he needed was emotional support, and at that moment, I did my best to give it to him. But I could not shake the wound of loss that was not even real. My body did not understand that it was not real, even though he was not in the accident, even though he was just emotionally distraught from watching his stepbrother being put in the ambulance, from losing him so tragically and suddenly. My body, my nervous system, everything had already engaged in the loss. And no matter how much logic I used to try to assure myself that it had not happened, I could not shake it. So I also needed a fresh start. And if this is what the family needed, rather than what my gut was telling me, that it was not going to be the whole answer, I knew that I had to at least try. It was the kind of loss where you gave it your best, and the circumstances created an environment where continuing was not possible. That very long process, as painful as it was deeply educational. It allowed me to see that I truly was doing the best I could do, and that everyone was doing the best they could, given their circumstances, given their situation. As Alfred Adler observed, they had a very normal reaction to a very abnormal environment. The legal issues my employers struggled with affected me, but it was not personal. They did not do it to me. It was not my personal failing. And when I was traumatized and had the shock response, that was outside of my control as well. I could not think the same way. I could not process. I could not fake it. I could not pretend to be okay because my body would not allow it. The trauma was just too deep. It took time out of that environment, time not trying to force myself to do it. Before I understood what had happened to me and why I needed to move as much as my family needed me to move. For many years, I thought I did it just for my kids. But this process gives me a chance to look back and see the truth. I changed that day. I could not find a rhythm to go back to being a student when I was still grieving what turned out to not even be the loss of my son. I experienced the loss of my son nonetheless, and I had been experiencing the loss of my children through their addiction, slowly and continuously. But thinking that I lost him to an accident, everything caught up. It is like that old joke about driving an old station wagon. You have lived a lifetime of drinking a beer and throwing the can in the back. And then, all of a sudden, something happens and you slam on the brakes, and all of those beer cans from the back come forward and consume you, drown you in all of your past feelings that got shut down and avoided. That is when I started really wondering the question, how did I get through that? How did I heal? How did I get back to the place where I could think again, learn again, be teachable again? And how could I help others who were in a similar spot find their way back home? After the psychological trauma that took me back to a place I had lived in as a child, I knew there was something about the way I interpreted things, the way I processed things, the way I understood things, that was outside of my control. The nervous system overrides logic to protect itself. But I was doing my best. I believe that we all are. And if we can gain an understanding of the situation, we find grace. We find where we are able to go into the chrysalis and see the truth about the wound, and also the option to blame ourselves, to re-traumatize ourselves over and over, or to accept a grace that is able to understand that we do not have any power over the things outside of ourselves. When I started wondering about that question, I started doing some research, and that is when I realized there was not a lot out there. We are taught how to forgive others through religion, school, parents, society, but there is not much that focuses on this concept of how to forgive ourselves, how to let go of the need to blame ourselves, how to have compassion and mercy for ourselves, how to grieve in a safe way that allows the wound to heal. It was not that the world had been silent about self-forgiveness. Across centuries and cultures, traditions of every kind had found a way to name its importance. Hindu philosophy carried the concept of kshama, the releasing of resentment toward oneself. Buddhist practice taught compassion turned inward. Jewish tradition named the process of teshuvah, the returning to oneself. The Christian concept of grace had always included it. Indigenous healing practices built communities around it. The 12 steps were built on it. Every tradition had found a way to say, you need to release yourself from your own condemnation. The conviction that it mattered was always there across all of these teachings, across centuries. What was not there was the map of what actually happens inside, psychologically and experientially, when someone does it. Not the instruction, not the belief, the process itself, what you will feel as it moves, what the terrain looks like from the inside, how you know when you have crossed a threshold and are not just performing forgiveness as a duty. That was the gap. And that is what I decided I wanted to do for my dissertation, a heuristic study, looking at my own experience, trying to gain a better understanding of what happened and how. Once things stabilized, I started again at Capella University, a doctorate in addiction psychology. Some of my credits transferred, but of course, they want you to finish their program. About a year in, family needed me again. I stopped. I had gone too long and was not able to complete that program either. A few years passed. I got married, things settled, and I made a decision. I was going to finish what I had started. When I enrolled again at Capella, it was in a completely different PhD program. This one, a PhD in psychology, because I had been out too long to continue where I left off. Once again, I had to start over. Some credits transferred in, but they want you to complete their program, take their classes, do their work in order to get their PhD. So I signed up and started my third PhD program. 3 doctoral programs, every road blocked by something I could not control, and every time I went back. Part of what allowed me to finish was that I finally knew what question I was trying to answer, not the academic question, the living question. I had been practicing therapy for years by then, working with clients on self-forgiveness, teaching what I knew from the inside, but I did not have the confidence to say with authority, "This is not just my way." I needed to know whether what I had learned through my own journey was something repeatable, something teachable, something that could be found by others who had not lived my particular version of the road. That is what the research was for, not the credential, the confirmation, and the gap. The research kept pointing back to was the same gap I had been circling my whole adult life. I could forgive someone else. I could help someone else. I could sit across from a client and help them trace their wound back to its origin and begin to loosen its hold. I gave 26 years to that work, and I believe in it completely. I just did not know how to do any of it for myself. Every framework I had absorbed, every road I had walked was pointed outward, toward others. No one, in all of that studying, in all of those programs, in all of those years, had taught me how to forgive myself. There were just voices that said I should already know how. I should be able to just move on. I should be able to love myself. I should be able to know that I am enough. I should be able to say no. I should. And every time someone offered me a new teaching from outside as if it would reach the wound on the inside, the shame went a little deeper, not because they were wrong, because I understood everything they said and still could not do it for myself. And I concluded what anyone concludes from that gap. Something must be fundamentally broken in me. It was not broken, but I did not know that yet. What I know now is that the gap between knowing and living is not evidence of brokenness. It is evidence of where you are in the journey. There is a season for planting and there is a season for harvesting. I kept trying to harvest things I had barely planted. I needed to learn what every farmer knows. You cannot rush the roots. You can only tend the ground and give it time. And it took music to remind me of that on the hardest days. A Wilson Phillips song, "Hold On for One More Day." I must have listened to it hundreds of times alone in the dark when the old agreements were running loud and I could not find my way back to what I knew was true. Not because the song gave me the answer, because it told me to stay. One more day, keep going. You're not as lost as you feel right now. That song did something the frameworks could not do. It reached through the wall and kept me on the journey one more day. And then one more day after that. And one day at a time, I found my way. And those 9 co-researchers who came from different generations, different cultures and religious backgrounds, different life circumstances, shared their journey about how they found their way, which is how we discovered the map that we want to offer to you. One was a Jewish psychotherapist in his 40s who had spent his career helping others and could not find the same path for himself. One was a Hispanic man in recovery whose Catholic upbringing had told him what to feel, but not how to actually get there. One was a woman in her 60s who had carried pre-verbal trauma so deep she had no language for it. A young artist who had believed since childhood that she was unwanted, a mother who had lost her son to suicide, a doctor who had built a successful practice while the wound stayed untouched, different thresholds, different wounds, different roads. For the purpose of this book, the injuries and patterns of transformation represented in the warrior archetypes come from the research data of the co-researchers. That data has been shaped to remove information that would expose the private details of each person's life so that we can honor what the co-researchers gave us in a way that honors them and their ability to tell their own story in their own time on their own terms. What remains in each archetype is what they were willing to share with us, presented so that maybe you can see your story in theirs. There are as many different stories and journeys as there are people. But along each of these journeys, we found common themes that help us identify where we are and relate to others who have been on this same road, so that we understand we are not alone. This is nature's path to protect us and help us become the loving warriors we were intended to be. The word warrior comes from a teaching I have used in my clinical practice for over 26 years, the story of the samurai and the dojo. A samurai trains every day, all day, for most of their life in the dojo. They learn everything the dojo can teach them. They are no longer practicing their skills. They have achieved the status of samurai. And then they are sent out into the world because the dojo has nothing more to teach them. It is out there that the world starts to teach what only the world can teach. If the world is at peace, and the warrior carries an identity built for a conflict that no longer exists, the skills of the samurai are real. The training was real, but the world the samurai was trained for is not the world the samurai is living in, much like the child trained for survival, who is then placed in an environment where love is what is being offered. The skills that child developed were brilliant for the environment that required them, but when the environment changed, those same skills get misinterpreted. They become the source of conflict instead of a source of safety, and the warrior does not understand. What used to work no longer protects them. In fact, those very same skills are the things that are isolating them from what the world has to offer: love, joy, excitement, curiosity. Because the samurai believes they have learned everything. They are not open to what the world has to teach, not because they consciously say, "I do not want it." It is because they believe they already have everything they need. After all, they have become a master at being a samurai. And to think that they do not have the answer leaves them vulnerable, which feels dangerous. We will talk more at length about the samurai and the dojo in the philosophy section of this book. I filed the dissertation. I went back to my practice, and for the next 10 years, I watched the map prove itself true in the faces of the people sitting across from me 3 days a week, who had no idea that a doctoral study had already documented exactly where they were. That gap between the knowledge that existed and the people who needed it became increasingly difficult to accept. I gave the dissertation to my children. I told my clients about it. Not one person read it. And so I wrote this book. Before you go further, I want to tell you what you are holding. This is not your typical textbook or self-help book. It is not instruction from outside the wound. It is not a framework handed to you by someone above the territory who has found the destination of self-forgiveness. There are many good books that do that. This is not one of them. And that does not take anything away from those tools. Treatment can help, counseling can help, all of them can help if you are at the right time to receive the help. But if someone is not ready to enter the threshold that allows for the evolution, that allows for this journey, that is not a failure on their part or on the map's part. We just do not know exactly how the door will open for us until it has opened. But having an understanding of what it looks like when the door does open helps us to relax a little bit and to look at open doors with possibility instead of fear. We cannot predict what your journey will look like. All we can do is give you a map so that when you are on your journey, you can recognize the season you are in and plan accordingly. What I am offering you is a view from the inside. The methodology I chose for the research requires the researcher to be a full participant in the study. My own experience is not a bias to be managed. It is data. What that means in practice is this. I'm not writing from healed distance, looking back at a resolved past. I'm writing from the ongoing integration of the wounded child I was and the adult I am becoming. Two selves in the process of saving each other. Not me saving her, not her saving me. Both of us finally coming to understand the misunderstanding the wound was built on, because the wounds were built on misunderstanding, not malice, not irreparable damage. Misunderstanding, delivered by systems and people doing the best they could with what they had, received by a child who had no other framework to evaluate it. Understanding both of those perceptions, the child's and the adult's, is what creates the compassion to feel safe enough to change your mind. You cannot compassionately correct a misunderstanding you are still inside of. This is a phoenix story, not the version where something is burned to ash so that something better can replace it. The phoenix that rises from the chrysalis does not rise from its own destruction. It rises from its own transformation. What dissolves in the chrysalis is not you. What dissolves is the misunderstanding, the agreements made by a child who had no other framework, the identity built from verdicts that were never accurate, the fear that masqueraded as truth because nothing arrived in time to offer a different reading. The child does not get burned. The child gets to come home. The work of the chrysalis is to bring the child's lived experience and the adult's understanding together so they can do what they were always trying to do, find each other. When mercy and fire unite, love is forged. The new identity is not someone better. It is someone true. What I have learned from the research and from my own life is that understanding ourselves does not happen in only one part of us. It is not only mental. It is not only emotional. It is not only physical. It is not only spiritual. It is all of it at the same time. The process of becoming self-forgiving is physical, mental, and spiritual. These are not separate systems. They are one system designed to work together. When they are in communication with each other, we experience coherence. We feel like ourselves. When they are not in communication, we experience confusion, conflict, and fragmentation. We feel lost. We feel like something is wrong with us. This is not a failure. This is not pathology. This is what happens when development is interrupted by trauma or neglect or some other environmental cause outside of the child's control. Nature designed us to integrate. The mind of the child, which thinks in concrete terms, right and wrong, good and bad, safe and dangerous, was always meant to grow into the mind of the adult, which can think abstractly beyond categories, with compassion and complexity. That integration happens naturally when we feel safe. And when the environment is not safe, nature does what nature always does. It protects what it cannot yet develop. It builds a cocoon, not as pathology, as preservation. Recent neuroscience confirms what the research found and what the body has always known. The body holds what the mind cannot process. When trauma disrupts the body's most basic sensory systems, the ones that tell us where we are, whether we are safe, whether we can trust what we are feeling, it cascades upward through the entire system. The body cannot regulate. The emotions cannot stabilize. The sense of who we are fragments. And the conscious mind, the part that knows better, cannot reach the place where the wound actually lives. That is not a character flaw. That is a neurological reality. The gap between knowing and living is not a failure of willpower. It is a feature of how human beings are built when the foundation has been disrupted. The body also has its own language for emotion, a sensory system that researchers call interoception. Before we can name what we feel, the body has already felt it. a racing heart, a tightness in the chest, a flush of heat, a constriction in the throat. Those signals are the body's way of telling us what is true before the mind has decided what to call it. When that system is working, we can read ourselves. When trauma has disrupted it, we cannot distinguish between a real threat and a memory of one. Both produce the same body signals, and we cannot interpret either one accurately. This is why someone can know they are safe and still feel terrified. The body is reporting danger from a system the conscious mind cannot override because it cannot even sense it clearly. The 6 themes from the research help us understand how this works. Theme 1. The dark night of the soul is when the system first signals that something is not aligned. The body begins to feel what the mind cannot yet explain. I went on every yellow brick road I could find looking for answers. I could forgive someone else. I could save someone else. I could help someone else. I just did not know how to help me, how to save me, how to love me, how to be enough to me. And so I continued to survive without it until I could not do anymore. I had hit my limit. I was empty. The concrete understanding built in childhood, the agreements about who I was and what I was worth, was meeting a developing capacity to think differently, and they did not match. That internal conflict is not because something is wrong with us, it is because something is trying to change. Theme 2, the social echo of shame and reconnection, is the voice we learned before we had the ability to question it. My play as a child consisted of following my mother around and trying to make her okay enough so that she would love me. The internal messages were clear. Who do you think you are? You are no better than we are. Do not leave the family. We cannot get along without you. Those voices became my voice. Those interpretations became my truth. And the body held that organization at a level below conscious awareness, in the muscles, in the breathing patterns, in the way I learned to brace and perform what looked like the right emotion, while blocking what I actually felt. I had been faking it, feeling something that resembled happiness by doing for others, but my body was speaking a different language. It was creating a defensive wall. The system organized itself around what it was given, even when what it was given was incomplete or inaccurate. Theme 3, profound self-transformation, is the moment something begins to shift. For me, that moment happened in New York City. Until then, I had to choose grief or joy, one or the other. I could not hold both. And then something changed. I let joy in, and the chrysalis became both at the same time. I was able to feel grief and joy simultaneously. When I allowed the grief to come through, I was also opening up to the joy coming through. That is the shift. A question surfaces that the body feels before the mind names it. What if what I believed is not the whole truth? This is not resolution. It is awareness. The old self is not destroyed. It is reabsorbed into the whole. The caterpillar reemerges, and we have an opportunity to consolidate without abandoning, without judgment. We accept the process as normal and loving, and we get interested and curious instead of resisting the evolution. Theme 4, self-forgiveness as a moral necessity rather than a moral judgment, is the recognition that the system was not failing, it was adapting. When I decided to take responsibility back for my own life, when I stopped trying to change someone else because I was not his mother and not his savior, that was when I started learning self-forgiveness. It was learning how to have a more loving relationship with myself first, so that I could have the foundation built to have a loving relationship with others, filling the gap from the place of love and nurturing and reparenting instead of judgment and criticism and beating myself up for not knowing what I did not know. The child who shut down was not broken. The teenager who raged was not bad. The adult who could not stop repeating the pattern was not weak. They were all doing exactly what the system had trained them to do in the environment they were given. And in that recognition, compassion becomes possible, not forced, not performed, but felt in the body where the wound has been waiting for permission to be seen differently. Theme 5, the ability to receive love is what becomes possible when safety begins to return to the system. For most of my life, I could not receive love even when people were showing it to me because I did not trust it. What I could receive was approval. If I did something they approved of, I was no longer in the line of fire. And then, at Yeshiva University, a professor who knew my story was genuinely trying to protect me. It did not seem like a clinical attempt. It seemed authentic and genuine, and my body relaxed. When another issue confronted that safety, my defenses were down and the feelings came through. I was sobbing in the bathroom, more than anger, more than grief, sadness and joy and connection, authentic connection. And it did not scare me. I was able to receive it. I celebrated it. That was the first time. The body no longer had to defend against what was being offered, not because someone convinced me to let it in, because the system finally recognized that it was safe enough to receive. Theme 6, continued growth, is the recognition that this process does not end in arrival. Having the second training does not mean you are immune. We still experience life. The survival mechanisms that were built to protect us do not check whether we have done the work before they activate. They fire when the threat is perceived, subconsciously, without permission. And when they fire, the map is not gone. But you cannot read it, not until the body feels safe enough to come back to the road. The growing is no longer a destination. It is a lifelong journey. And we can anchor it in love instead of fear if we can stay in the process of connecting, and then reconnecting, and reconnecting, and reconnecting throughout this journey. Each time the wound gets touched again, because life does not stop happening, we respond with patience instead of judgment. Not because we are immune, because we are practiced. Each of these themes reflects a shift not just in thought, but in the entire system, the body, the mind, and the meaning we make of our experience. When trauma interrupts development, these systems lose communication with each other. The body holds what cannot be processed. The mind organizes what it can understand. And meaning is constructed from whatever information is available, which is usually incomplete. This is where the separation occurs, not because it is supposed to stay that way, because it is not yet safe for it to reconnect. Nature accounts for this. When transformation cannot safely occur in the open, it happens in the cocoon, not as escape, not as regression, as protection. The cocoon is not where we go to become something different. It is where the conditions are created for integration to resume. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly by trying harder. It becomes a butterfly because the cocoon provided the safety for the transformation that was always in its nature. And just like in nature, this process cannot be forced. It happens when the system recognizes that it is safe enough. This is where tools become important, not because they fix us, not because they override what the system is doing, but because they help create the conditions that allow the system to do what it was designed to do. Music reaches the body when words cannot get past the wall. A story provides a mirror when direct reflection feels too threatening. A meditation invites the body to arrive before the mind categorizes. An image bypasses the defenses that were built against instruction and reaches the part of us that responds to beauty and recognition. The goal is not to separate the physical, mental, and spiritual and fix them one at a time. The goal is to restore communication between them, to create enough safety in the body that the mind can reconsider what it believes and meaning can reorganize without fear. This is the process of self-forgiveness, not as an idea, as an integration. The models that came before this one were doing the best they could. They were a step in the right direction. But the old social echo, the one that told even past theorists and teachers and religious leaders to condemn what was bad and defend what they believed was right, That echo made it very difficult to evolve. We could not change our minds without shame and guilt and judgment. What I am offering is not something better. It is a more loving interpretation, an expanded understanding of what we did not know until we had the experience. And now we have clarity. But most of that clarity is this: we still do not know what we do not know, and we will be learning every single day if we are open and teachable. That is what the map is intended to show. We never arrive at a place of knowing what to condemn or what to judge as good or bad. We need all of it, the darkness and the gold threads, in order to understand the weaver's pattern, which we call life. The hope is that we learn from the darkness and gain wisdom, so that we do not have to keep repeating it. But if we deny either part, the good or the bad, then we do not learn and we do not grow. We just repeat it until it becomes safe enough to integrate, so that we can finally see the design and evolve. This book moves the way that process moves, inward before it moves forward, and cyclical before it becomes fluent. Just like the yellow brick road, you may have diversions that you cannot see contributing to the journey you are on, and we do not know what threshold we are going to cross, or when it is going to be the threshold that allows us access to the inside. The film never quite resolves whether Dorothy's journey is a dream or something more. She wakes up in Kansas and tells everyone about it, but the faces she met in Oz were the same faces from her ordinary life. That ambiguity is not a mistake in the story. It is the teaching. The subconscious knows things the waking mind has not yet processed. The inner map becomes visible in the dream state, or in the crisis, or in the quiet after a loss, or in the opening of a book. Sometimes it is a dream that breaks something open. Sometimes it is a death. Sometimes it is a birth. Sometimes it is a neighbor with a court order and a dog being taken away. The threshold does not announce its form in advance. What matters is not how it arrives. What matters is whether you are willing to follow the road when it appears. This is not something you can go hunting for. It is something you have to be safe enough to allow. And that is a whole different energy, one that I was not used to trusting. I felt it would make me vulnerable, weak, in danger. I could not plan for it. I just witnessed it, that something had changed, and all of the outward roads and journeys I took helped me to understand the contrast between the things I can control and the things I cannot, and that wisdom does not come without the experience. That is why the map is designed to help create experience, so that if you are on this journey and looking for a threshold, you understand, do not take it personal. It is not that you are doing something wrong. There is something in you that nature is working very hard to keep safe, to protect, and we do not know what we do not know. But when we experience, there is a knowing that cannot be denied. We recognize it, and so we learn to trust ourselves, to listen. And when we feel ourselves getting lost, instead of being upset about it, we learn to get interested in it, get curious. What just happened? What was the diversion? What was it teaching me? What am I ready to heal? Becoming present. Having faith that the diversions are not to be avoided because they carry very useful information. Just like in The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy was sent on all those different journeys by the wizard, he did not know what she needed. He just knew that he did not have the answer, and so he distracted her by having her look in other places. And we do that with ourselves. We do not know how to know what we do not know, and so we do the best we can. That inability to receive love that I described earlier, the wall that stayed up even when people were trying to show me they cared, it shaped everything. I learned to settle for approval instead of love. And I tried to teach my siblings the same survival skill, how to get out of the line of fire, not how to receive, how to survive. My answers were not outside myself. I had looked everywhere outside, my whole lifetime, and nothing out there could give me what I needed. All it could do was help me see that the answer was not out there. And that is an important awareness to have, because when I finally did go inside, it was because I had already looked for everything outside. But going inside was so scary that I could not go alone. I had tried. I needed a belief in a power greater than me that lived within me, that would guide me and help me find my way home. And it did. What you call it does not change what it is. Whether you call it spirit or God or your soul or nature, the naming of it does not change the power of it. But the power is inside. It is within all of us, and it always has been. Nothing outside of us can give us that power. When I was in my PhD program at USD is when I really learned about Adler and the teachings about what a child learns early in life, how it impacts the agreements they carry into adulthood. If there is not somebody there to build the bridge between the concrete child's experience and the abstract adult's understanding, you tend to live your life in conflict and get very discouraged. The goal is to build that bridge so that life can be built on love instead of fear of not being enough. That is not an accident. I'm not apologizing for it. I'm telling you now, so that when it feels unfamiliar, you know. The unfamiliar is the point. You have been on the other roads. This is the inside one. How do we become self-forgiving? It is not an intellectual awareness or a choice. There are things that we have to do. Practice. The training is important in order to become self-forgiving as a lifestyle, as a life choice, instead of always at war, mostly with ourselves. Self-forgiveness is a practice, not a destination. And this book will show you the practice. You may read this book 3 times, the first time for comfort. Let it in as story. Do not analyze. Do not apply it to yourself yet. The second time to notice, where did you feel it in your body? What activated? What settled? The third time to work. Bring the mind alongside the body and begin to ask what it means for your life. That is not a suggestion. That is how healing moves through the wall. And that is why we are developing this book into an institute, so that those who find this book to be something they could use on their own journey, we will provide a deeper map, not just to help you understand where you are in your journey, but to help you understand at a deeper level how that part of your journey has meaning and purpose in your life, so that you can tell your own story about your journey. Not trying to find a way to take my journey or one of the other co-researchers' journeys and make it yours. We are all human, but we are all individuals at the same time. We have some things in common, but we also have very unique features. The map honors both. Here is how this book is laid out. Part 1 introduces the map, what the research found, the 6 themes that emerge from 9 completely different lives, the 9 thresholds that mark the journey, not as destinations, but as landmarks, recognizable places other people have passed through, so that when you are standing in one, you know you are not lost. You will understand the terrain before the journey begins. You are allowed to know where you are. The map is not hidden from the student. Part 2 takes you on the road. You will follow Isabella, a helping warrior, a researcher who became her own co-researcher, a woman who spent 26 years helping others find their way before she turned the map inward on herself. Her journey through the 6 themes is not a prescription for yours. It is a companion, a proof of concept, a demonstration that the map actually works when it is walked, not just studied. Part 3 opens the widest lens, because the wound you carry did not start with you. It has history, older than your parents, older than their parents, older than anyone still living who could explain where it began. The misunderstanding was already traveling when it arrived, and the healing does not end with you either. What you do with this journey reaches forward into lives that have not yet been lived. But Part 3 is also honest about what happens when the warrior who has the map, who has both trainings, who has practiced self-forgiveness, is re-traumatized by life, by culture, by loss, by the things that are outside of anyone's control. The generational healing is real. And so is the reality that having the second training does not make you immune. Part 3 is where both of those truths become visible. There are no bad guys in this book, only misunderstandings, and a map that may help you gain clarity and a better understanding of the misunderstanding, hopefully with enough compassion to allow you to change your mind, heal the inner conflict, and evolve so that you can build a life anchored in love instead of fear. When the hurt is named, when you can finally see the source of the misunderstanding and not just feel its weight, something shifts, not all at once, but the grip loosens, and in that loosening, something the wound has been hiding becomes visible. The strength that was always there, the capacity to choose, the shoes that were always on your feet. I have been on sabbatical for 1.5 years trying to build what you are now holding. I want to be honest with you about why. For 26 years, I sat across from people in the therapy room and worked to help my clients feel safe enough to enter their own threshold. I worked with clients on self-forgiveness because I had walked that road myself. I knew it from the inside. But I did not have the right to say with authority, not just to one person at a time, in one room at a time, that this is not just my way. The research gave me that. 9 people, 9 completely different stories, one recognizable map for every journey. The dissertation proved that these themes work, but the dissertation did not make it accessible to the people who needed it most. We helped raise 8 of our grandchildren. 4 are adults now and out on their own. 4 still live at home with us. And our oldest granddaughter has this beautiful little baby girl that we get to be a part of her life as our oldest granddaughter heals from her addiction and builds the life she has always wanted and continues to evolve. The pain of addiction travels backwards and forwards through the generations, but so do the blessings. Self-forgiveness, seeing the world from a new vantage point, that also travels backwards and forwards. And it is such an honor to see my great-granddaughter remind all of the rest of us just how wonderful life can be. I am loving my children who are still in the middle of their own journeys, doing the best I can for them, praying that the day comes when they are stable enough to care for their children themselves. And I have clients I have worked with for years, some for over a decade, who I love and who trust me. The 4 grandchildren still at home are going through the same thing every young person goes through. It is a normal part of growing up, the bridge between the concrete thinking of childhood and the abstract understanding of adulthood. They are struggling with the feeling that they need somebody to save them, somebody to fix it, somebody to make them feel smart enough and loved enough and brave enough to evolve into an adult world that is coming faster than they feel ready for. My granddaughter tells me we are too busy, that we do not have time for her. Dorothy said the same thing in Kansas. I offered my children the second training. I taught them what I knew, but they were also exposed to their father's teaching, which was anchored in the first training, and to the cultural and social exposure that reinforced the first training. The second training I offered was considered, but it was not accepted as the threshold they wanted to walk through. They feared losing parts of themselves they wanted to hold on to, the ability to play, to not be so responsible, to have fun. They watched how hard I worked, and they told me plainly they did not want to work that hard. What they saw in the second training looked like struggle, and they chose not to enter. That taught me something I could not have learned any other way. Having the map does not guarantee access to the map. The threshold is a choice only the individual can make. When they are ready, if they get ready, you cannot click the heels for someone else. That is not a failure of the teaching or the teacher. It is the nature of how this works. And it is why I am building something they can come back to. Not when I decide the time is right, when they do. The best thing I can do for all of them, my family, my clients, my community, anyone who has stood where they are standing, is to make these themes teachable, accessible, not locked in an academic archive, not available only in a therapist's office, not dependent on me being in the room. Self-forgiveness lays the foundation for all the other problems to be manageable, not solved, manageable. That is what 26 years taught me. And I want to give that foundation to the people I love before I step back from the pace I have kept my whole adult life. I appreciate the joy in my life. I am looking forward to spending more time with my family and my community and future students in the teachings of the Self-Forgiveness Institute. This way, I will be able to hopefully connect with many more people and pay forward the gifts this map has provided me in my life. That last sentence is the whole book. The warrior who spent 26 years helping other people find their way home wants what she has been teaching others to claim, not as a reward, as the practice lived. And so, I am building something that can outlive my pace, a map, a set of tools, a way of working with the teachings that does not require me to be in the room every time. This book is part of that. The courses, the songs, the institute, all of it is part of that. What I want more than anything is for the people I have cared for to have something to come back to when I step back. A voice that reminds them, you know this road. Come back to the chrysalis. Follow, follow, follow. One more day. That is what I am building. That is who built this book. Once I understood my own journey, I also understood my children's journey with addiction differently. Instead of the insanity of doing the same thing over and over, genuinely expecting a different result, I came to understand that treatment is not the cure. It is an opportunity for those who are able to receive, much like finishing my dissertation and my comprehensive exam was an invitation for me if I was able to receive it. But something outside of my control, the grief, the loss, the shock, the body's inability to take in new information, those things were outside of my control, much like I witnessed with my kids and others who struggle with addiction. It is not that they do not know what they are doing. It is that they cannot get access to the wounds to heal so that they can find their way back home to who they have always been. The trauma, whatever it was that broke that connection of receiving, has to be reconnected. Or you go to treatment 100 times. And it is not because they do not want the help. I want to be transparent about something. I had practiced self-forgiveness before any of this. I had the second training. I had the map. And as I continued watching my children struggle with their addiction and face legal challenges, as I had to take them to court to get custody, as my son went to prison when he was only 18 years old, those things took a toll. And then, when his dad's girlfriend's son, a young man he was very close to and referred to as his stepbrother, was killed in a car accident, and I thought it was him, that re-traumatized me. It set me back. I was in a state of shock and trauma that would not allow me to access what I had already learned. It would not allow me to take in new information. I was back in survival mode. As I named earlier in the 6 themes, the second training does not come with immunity. And here is what that looked like in my life. The survival mechanisms fired. They did not ask whether I had already done the work. They did not care that I had the map. They activated because the threat was perceived, and the body responded before the mind could intervene. The map was still there. I just could not read it. Not until my body felt safe enough to come back to the road. And that takes time. The survival mechanism that kicks in is there for a reason. It is doing what it was designed to do, protect you. It does not deserve judgment. It does not deserve criticism. It does not deserve you beating yourself up because you have been re-traumatized. That response, the shame of falling when you thought you knew better, that is the old training. That is fear responding to fear. What the second training gives you is not immunity. It is an option. You can hear the old training kick in, the voice that says, you should be past this by now, that you should not be here again. And you can make a decision. You can go back to the old way, or you can hang on to the truth in a loving way and allow patience for the healing that is required. That is loving yourself with compassion and empathy instead of fear and judgment. That is the practice. That is why part 3 of this book matters as much as parts 1 and 2, because the wound you carry did not start with you, and the healing you do does not shield you from life continuing to happen. What changes is not that you stop being impacted by life and the things you experience. What changes is that when you are hurt, you no longer judge or criticize or beat yourself up. Or if you do, you do not do it for as long. You recenter. You allow yourself to go back into the chrysalis, getting interested in what just happened, getting curious about what is being taught. You look for the lessons inside the experience instead of the judgment, so that you remain teachable and life continues to teach you on this path of self-forgiveness. You have been home before, you know the road, and each time, even after the worst of it, you find your way back. Not because you are immune, because you are practiced. I understand that more completely because I went to a treatment center in Glasgow, Montana, looking for help and got kicked out. That does not mean I did not get anything. They planted a seed, but they did not know how to help me. And it humbled me to understand that I may have planted some seeds in my children, but I do not know how to help them. It is an inside job. God knows, the universe knows, and I am creating a map so that if and when they find their threshold, they have a map to follow, one that allows them to merge fire and mercy and forge true love for themselves first. And then they will be able to experience relationships with others from that same foundation of love and truth. I am sorry. I did not know what I did not know, but I am so grateful to have gained this wisdom that the Serenity Prayer talks about. The hard part is, much like in The Wizard of Oz, you do not get wisdom without experience. We all have to go on our own journey. We gain wisdom from the experience of focusing outwardly, and that focus helps us find the direction inwardly. It is not a mistake. It is a compass moving us closer and closer until there is a threshold that provides the safety we need to go in. May you find your threshold. Dorothy needed to go on all of those journeys outward. They were distractions, yes, but they were necessary distractions. Much like most of us who go into the chrysalis, we go in knowing that the answer is inside somewhere, and we go seeking. It is in that experience of looking at what we tell ourselves we are not enough of that causes the misery in our lives. Dorothy ran away from home looking for answers outside of herself when the tornado switched the direction so that she could find the answers that were inside of her. She took all of the elements of herself that seemed like they were not enough, and somehow, together, they became stronger. Together, united. They cared for each other. They loved each other exactly how they were, and they defended each other instead of judging each other. And then she went back and witnessed how the Wizard of Oz was intimidating and scaring parts of herself, not being smart enough, not being courageous enough, not being loving enough. But when she saw the other part of her, the innocence, the little puppy being frightened, and she could not see him as not being enough, then she was able to stand up to it. That was her threshold. When she no longer looked outside of herself, when she no longer allowed the social echo to be in charge, she drew a boundary, and her innocence pulled back the curtain on the wizard and discovered that he was just a man. He could not give her what she was looking for because he did not have it, and he was not a monster. He was just a man. And then she was able to hear Glinda tell her the truth. It was always in her. She could always do it. She just did not have the wisdom to understand what was outside of her control and what was inside of her control, and the power she had inside of her own belief system, her own inner strength that took her back home. The second training is learning to incorporate all of those things that cause the conflict of feeling not enough, so that we can love ourselves unconditionally and appreciate what we have instead of always looking outside of ourselves for answers. We learn to trust that we are enough, and that if we are listening, we can learn from our mistakes. We can be teachable. That is an important part of her journey, much like what happened to me was an important part of my journey. I needed all of those distractions because they led back to my center each time. No matter how much I accomplished, it did not change how I felt. No matter how much I fought to stop all of the evil in the world, it did not take it away. It invited me to become part of that evil. Those paradoxes were important to see, that you could love someone and let them go because you love that person, but you cannot rescue them. You can only witness and love and be there alongside their distractions and their journey until they learn to love themselves. And then it comes both ways. They are able to receive love and they are able to give love. And I was able to receive love and I was able to give love. But first, I had to love myself before I could receive love from anywhere else or offer true love anywhere else. The old way I offered love was to control everything, to manage everything, to guard everything, to protect everything, to rescue. It took a long time to understand that was not love. That was fear. The shoes were always on her feet. This book is the yellow brick road, not a shortcut, not a system to apply from the outside. The road itself, with its 6 landmarks, its companions, its moment of reckoning in front of the wizard who cannot give you what you already have, and its final turn inward to the place that was always home. You will get off track. That is not failure. That is life. The agreements never stop operating because life never stops presenting you with new invitations to grow. But each time you find your way back, you will find it faster. Because you will have been home before. You will know what it feels like. And the going back will become, over time, not a defeat, but a practice. It is not a skill you learn. It is who you become. You are not the only one who has stood here. Not in the dark, not in the place where the old voice is running loud and the road ahead is not yet visible. 9 people documented this journey in careful detail so that you would know that. I have watched hundreds more walk it in the years since. You are not lost. You are becoming. We can relate to the yellow brick road because it provided a map. We are here to show you the map to follow on the journey of self-forgiveness. Welcome.